Hey, good afternoon from London, everybody. We'll start the session now. Um, First of all, I'll do a couple of introductions and then I'll launch into my short presentation, and then we'll have some questions and answers afterwards for those of you who have any. Good afternoon from London. My name is Dr. Michael Short. I joined you this afternoon with one particular hat on, although I have several. I'm an associate professor in the Bartlett School of Planning. I'm the departmental tutor for postgraduate taught programs, meaning that I have oversight of all master's taught programs on students and your experience when you come and visit us and undertake study with us. I also am program director for the 2-year M-Plan City Planning, for those of you in the room who are interested. I'd just like to briefly pass on to two of my colleagues who can very briefly introduce themselves. Firstly, Maya. Hello.
Hello, everybody. I'm here from the student recruitment team, and I'm just here to technically support the session. So I'll be putting links to things that Michael were talking about in the chat as they're coming up.
Thank you, Maya. And can I introduce Mari Stokke? Hi, Mari.
Hi everyone, thanks Michael. I'm a master's student at the BSP, so I'm on the M-Plan City Planning program that Michael mentioned, and I'm in my second year, so it's a full-time 2-year master's course. I'm also a student ambassador, so I'm happy to answer any questions about the student experience during the Q&A, and if you have any questions at a later stage, I'm also on the UCL's UniBuddy platform, so feel free to reach out to me at any stage of your process.
Thank you very much, both of you. Okay, guys, what we'll do is I have a few slides that I'll take you through. No doubt you'll have some questions as I'm speaking. I'm very happy to take questions as we go, although if you're able to wait until the end of the short presentation, that's also fine as well. I'll just try and keep an eye on the questions as well, and maybe Maya, if questions come in that I don't notice, perhaps you can jolt me into answering. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We've introduced ourselves. What I really wanted to do today is a few short things, really, is introduce the Bartlett School of Planning, a quick scan of the names of people in the room. There's a few of our undergraduates or former undergraduates here, so welcome back. For those who don't know the school, I'll introduce it. I wanted to then talk briefly about the master's programs. We have quite a number of them, so I don't have time to talk about each in detail. But what I really wanted to do is use some of the issues, as far as we see it, in planning to kind of show you the breadth and depth of the work that we do and the depth and breadth of work that the students do with us. And then we'll have question and answers afterwards, hopefully. So the Bartlett School of Planning. Why the Bartlett School of Planning? I have been at the Bartlett School of Planning for 10 years now, but I can't quite believe that. It's one of the oldest and most respected schools of planning in the world. We actually are #1 in the world at the moment, the Bartlett is rather, which is a huge honor to work in and to teach students from all over the globe. We're a research-led planning school. In other words, those of us who are research active use our research as ways to teach our students. Often those students are involved in that research as well. We have an international reputation as a centre of academic excellence in that research, but also in teaching and policy and practice interaction. And I think one of the really exciting things for me as an academic working at the school is the mixture of those three areas. So in other words, research, teaching, and also kind of a practice-oriented set of activities. So nearly all of us work in practice additional to our academic work, and much of our research is actually policy and practice oriented. So you'll see many of our names pop up in relation to not only the UK, but international level planning discussions and discourse. I mentioned international very briefly there, but we have a very international staff in terms of where we're all from. You will see in the background there my home city of Newcastle, so I'm actually from the UK. But many of us also have an international outlook in terms of our research. I'll talk a bit about my own research later on in relation to expertise and how that informs our teaching. But you can see here we've got a very broad range of expertise within the school: planning, geography, design, sustainability, economics, sociology, real estate, politics. I should also add onto that kind of architecture. Many of our staff are architects by training. So we have a very broad range of specialities. So whilst we're a general school of planning, we have a lot of specialisms. And I guess it's worthwhile saying that our programs, the master's programs that you're interested in, stem from that expertise. So this is the list of our programs. We have 9 MSCs. The MSCs are all 1-year intensive taught masters. That's the full-time route. Nearly all of those have a part-time option. So for those of you who work in practice or work generally, you're able to come 1 day a week over 2 years to undertake those programs. We have a degree apprenticeship. Some of you in the room might be interested in that. That is where we offer the spatial planning degree program to people in practice, and they're sponsored through their work and through the government to undertake that degree apprenticeship. And then finally, we have the M-Plan. As I've already said, I'm the director of the M-Plan. And Mari is a second-year student on the M-Plan. That's the only one of our programs which is 2 years. So much more kind of familiar to those of you from outside of the UK who are used to 2-year programs. So that's the list of them. You can see the specialisms in the titles of those programs, covering everything from, as I've said, infrastructure, housing, real estate, urban design, etc. I can obviously answer any questions on those programs in particular as we go through. Just to say that while I'm talking, if there are kind of more personal questions that you might have that you wouldn't feel comfortable asking or dropping in the chat during this session, please do email me at any point, and I'm happy to respond, arrange a meeting, or direct your query if I can't answer it. So please do use my email address, which hopefully Maya will. There you go. Thank you very much, Maya. And here oh, good. I've just seen your question, Hannah Klein. Thank you. Why is the M-Plan specifically 2 years long? It's a very long answer, but I shall try and be brief. In essence, the UK and Ireland, I think it was in 2001, developed a whole series of master's programs across the 2 countries that were year-long intensive masters. Myself and Professor Ben Clifford, who works in the school, in 2015-16, developed an idea of a 2-year program, really to give students a longer time frame within which to undertake their studies, to develop their specialisms to a greater extent. So we get very different types of students on those 2 different types of programs. If that makes any sense to you, Hannah. Mari, I don't know whether there's anything you'd add as somebody who chose a 2-year program rather than 1.
I think it was, yeah, having that unique chance to really go into depth for 2 years, because I don't have a planning or architect background. I have a humanities background from undergraduate. So I wanted the time to really get into it. And I think also because there is the option of a work placement or the study abroad, which is quite unique as well. And there's some certain modules that are unique for the M-Plan, like the studio, which is, you know, a small cohort. Yeah, so there were a few things that really stood out to me about it, which is why I went for it.
Thank you very much. Great. Hopefully that answered your question, Hannah. Where can you study abroad during the M-Plan? It's quite a long list of places. The most exciting thing I can tell you is that we've just signed our agreement with Columbia University in New York, and we're sending an M-Plan student, Charlie, in January to Columbia. But if you have a look on the M-Plan pages, so the link that you can see on the PowerPoint there, which I think it is very exciting, Sab. Hopefully, Maya, you can drop that link into the chat. That will give you the full list of locations. I mean, it covers from everywhere, from Hong Kong, Melbourne, Sydney, Paris, Stockholm. Yeah, there's quite a long list. Okay. I mean, I think what I'd say to you all, if a 2-year program is of interest to you, then that's great. There's no requirement from the Royal Town Planning Institute for you to undertake a 2-year program. And actually, it remains the only 2-year program in planning in the country. But let's not make this only about the M-Plan. This is about a whole offer. And the next thing I want to say to you is please do spend some time looking at the Bartlett School of Planning's website. Maya and her team and many of the staff in the Bartlett School of Planning have spent a lot of time and energy over the last few months updating it. Here I show Stephanie. Stephanie was a graduate from the first cohort of M-Plan back in 2019. But the pages will give you a sense of the types of careers that students develop. Stephanie works for the Greater London Authority as a strategic planner. It comes and speaks and comes to the alum events for M-Plan quite often. But have a look on there. There's students from all different kinds of master's programs on there. So that will give you a sense of the types of careers people undertake. Thanks, Maya, for dropping that into the chat. I just wanted to talk about 4 or 5 kind of elements of our specialisms, just to give you kind of a sense of the types of work that we do as staff, but also how that informs our teaching and the type of work that students do. And by no means is this comprehensive. It's really just a kind of taster to give you a sense of the type of things that we do. You'll note that I will mention quite a few colleagues' names as we go through the next kind of 5 or 10 minutes. One of the things I really recommend that all prospective students do is to spend some time looking at staff, the academic staff's pages on the School of Planning website. I say that because not only does it give you a sense of generally where those people come from, kind of literally and kind of intellectually, but the types of publications, the types of work we do, the way in which we engage in practice kind of globally. So it's really useful to kind of see the types of things that we're writing and the types of ways that we engage with the discipline more broadly. So some of this is stuff that I do and some isn't. But first of all, one of the really interesting specialisms that we have within the school is around community engagement. So thinking about who do we plan for? So, you know, planning is an exercise in, I guess you might call it, managing change in the built environment. Many of you will be aware that there's big issues around kind of, you know, what communities would like and what is planned for them. So kind of how you might balance those two often competing demands. How communities are engaged with planning and for what purpose. But I think the kind of bigger question from my own perspective is thinking about whose knowledge, in other words, what knowledge is used in planning processes. And I guess the subtext to that being that as a school, we have a very strong idea that it's often the very communities we claim to speak on behalf, whose own understanding and knowledges of their home places is often either ignored or manipulated in particular ways. So I think, you know, we have a suite of modules that deals with these issues. I think actually Mari's undertaken one of them in her first year as an elective, but this one I outlined just because I'm a tutor on it. But this is collaborative city planning, which is led by my friend and colleague Elena Basucci, an Italian-British academic. Well, firstly, the module is core to the MSc Urban Design and City Planning. This program, which I ran for a year back in 2016-17, a really interesting program where you seek to develop responses to core planning issues through the lens of urban design. So thinking about how those two kind of things can marry up. A really interesting, there's too much text on here, really interesting module in the sense that what we do is we work with a particular community group, which has changed over the years, but will be the same this coming year as it was last year. And it's designed to give you the knowledge, skills, and behaviours required for design, delivery, and use of community engagement as a means to develop proposals. And this is very much comes from the idea of a community-led regeneration strategies. I said that it's a core module for the Urban Design Masters, but actually you can take it as an elective. And lots of students from outside the MSc in Urban Design do take it as a module. In essence, Eleanor, myself, and Hanadi, who are the 3 people who teach the module, we work with you through fieldwork, audits, surveys, mapping, design, to build knowledge about the project area and its communities. We then use your own understanding of that area to think about how we might engage those communities to test whether our ideas are right, really, to see whether the knowledge that we've created actually marries with the knowledge that community has of itself. And the kind of outcome is to prepare a high-level proposal for the revitalization of that area. hopefully, yes, I do have some pictures. This was taken from last year, last academic year, that is. We worked with the Kilburn Neighbourhood Forum. For those of you from the UK, you might be familiar with this, but for those of you outside, there is a theme in English planning, which is around neighbourhood development, so kind of neighbourhood-led development and planning. And really what we did in this module, you can see some of our students from the last year. There's Hanadi on the left, my colleague, working with that community at an open event to try and map understandings of the Kilburn High Road to use as a basis upon which to make decisions about planning. And what was really interesting about that, the students, that's Fernando, the guy with the glasses stood up, he came from an architecture background and was kind of leading his group and thinking about how you might engage lay people in an understanding of mapping and an understanding of their own neighborhood. So came up with this model, and actually it was great. This was at the beginning of the afternoon, but loads of members of the community came in and started sticking post-its on shops saying, you know, that's where they buy their Christmas turkey or whatever it might be, but actually layering up meaning in the community as a basis upon which decision-making for plans was made. A really, really successful event and really rewarding module to teach on. The coming year, we're going to work with Kilburn again because there's some more work that needs to be done there. But that gives you a sense of the community engagement specialism that we have in the school. We also have a very strong, I've already said that we have quite an international, we have a very international staff body, student body, and research interests. We have a strong theme of comparative urbanism in the school, and the kind of critical dialogues within that idea of comparison. So in other words, how can we develop a comparative understanding of planning and development cultures in international contexts? And how can we learn, if we can learn, and there's a big intellectual debate about whether one can copy practice from outside the country, whether there's any best practice that we might take from other international contexts. I'm looking at Mari again. Mari is my master's student. As you know, she's doing a dissertation with me, but looking at food production in Oslo, Norway. So really interesting, different cultural and national contexts. So a lot of us work outside the UK. The example just here is a really interesting project. I've actually literally just come back from Toronto, where I was co-running a workshop with my colleague, Professor Susanna Bunce, at the School of Geography and Centre for Cities. So this University of Toronto strategic partnership is an institutional level partnership between UCL and the University of Toronto. We attract many students from Toronto as a result of that, which of course is great. But this particular project developed during the COVID times, and looking at ways in which COVID has affected the way that we think about comparative planning in the two cities. So that project is 2.5 years long. It's got another 6 months to run, and our colleagues from Toronto, will be coming to London in spring. But if you have a look here, we've published a book so far and a number of articles. This is a UCL Press publication. For those of you not familiar with UCL Press, it is an open access publisher run from UCL, obviously, and this book is freely downloadable. So I would encourage those of you who are interested in international comparative planning to have a look at that. And I guess what's really interesting about that, not only is this a piece of work done between academics in the two institutions, it actually informs our teaching across both the undergraduate and postgraduate programs. And if you have a look at, sorry, Hannah, I'm not sure what that means, whether that's a, there's a website attributed to that project, which is in the process of being updated, but you can have a look at that. And here's some of the publications. On the left is the book that I've just mentioned. Thank you very much, Maya. That's great. And then you can see on the right some work that stemmed from that. So the four of us, you can see on the right. So Nicola Livingstone is now, she was at UCL, is now Professor of real estate at the University of Glasgow. There's myself, Dr. Stefania Fiorentino, who is at University of Cambridge, and Professor Susanna Bunce, who is University of Toronto. And I just show that as a kind of example of the way in which we work, not only at UCL, but across institutions and across national boundaries in our research projects. One of the other themes that's really quite interesting, actually, we also have this in common with the University of Toronto, is this idea of the relationship between planning and development and the kind of economic activities that take place within urban areas. I'm using this example of 0055, which is a module that actually the MPlan students take, amongst others, with Dr. Jessica Firm. Jess is our Director of Education, but that module can be taken by students from across a range of the postgraduate programs. She particularly has been interested in this idea that there's some literature there, as one plans a global city like London, and indeed many other global cities, actually the very diversity of economic activities often inadvertently planned out of that urban area. And I often give the example of King's Cross, which is very close to the UCL campus, where much of the, I mean, it's called low value, but much of the economic diversity, much of the employment that comes from that economic activity has actually been inadvertently lost. So I'm thinking, you know, kind of light industrial units, car repairs, that kind of thing, are actually somehow pushed out because they're not of value to the global economy. Yet, of course, as residents of London, these are activities that we need to take place. So Jess has been instrumental in leading project work around that topic. And for those of you interested, I would very much encourage you to look at some of that work. On the left here, you can see Jessica and Sonia, both Bartlett School of Planning colleagues, and then Professor Niamh Moore-Cherry, who is a friend and colleague from the University College Dublin in the Republic of Ireland. Anyway, so hopefully this has given you a sense of the kind of really broad range and diversity of specialisms that we have. We have another particular specialism in urban mobility, one of only 2 places in the UK that has that specialism. Particularly interested in issues of transit-oriented development and sustainability. I'm kind of plugged into this in relation to work I've done on density, which I'll talk about in a minute. But also thinking about infrastructure provision in transport infrastructure provision in new major development. What are the behavioural, financial, and governance barriers to a modal shift from the private car to public transport? And an example of this is, I just wanted to drop in that we do go on field trips. So the MSc Transport and City Planning has been going to Freiburg in Germany by train, I'd add, really to kind of investigate a place which is has its growth strategy predicated on public transport. So looking at non-car development, housing development, looking at ways in which public transport is used to promote sustainability and kind of good quality lifestyles. Yeah. Okay, and then finally, just one of the other things I'm bound to mention, just because I talk about this all the time and do lots of work on it at the moment, is this idea of drawing together the themes of urban design and urban form with density. So thinking about kind of normative ways that cities and planning authorities try to use densification. So in other words, somehow increasing the number of people, units, and infrastructure in a particular place to try and encourage more sustainable patterns of behavior. So I've been interested in this for a few years now, thinking about, often there's an assumption that by increasing the number of people in areas, somehow that might lead to more sustainable behavior. London's a very interesting example of a global city where there's lots of density with often not many people living in those new developments, you know, international investors who don't need to live there, for example. So thinking about that kind of, you know, higher density, higher buildings, what the impact of that is, how that might engender change to the city, how it might help and how it might not. The plan making studio, which I think Mari mentioned briefly earlier, led by myself and run with a colleague, Fernando Gutierrez, is core to the MPlan City Planning. And we really have an open studio environment within which we explore issues of densification and density. This last year and the year to come, I'm very pleased to say we work with the City of Westminster, which is one of the, I've forgotten the number now, 33 London boroughs. So in other words, one of the 33 municipalities in London, thinking about how we might come up with more dense solutions on particular sites in Westminster. And really, I mean, what's really quite exciting for me anyway in a studio environment is to help students develop their critical awareness of density in a collaborative and critical studio environment. And there is a picture. Who's not talking? Is that Halle, Mari, I think? This is from last academic year's studio. You can see quite a relatively small class. This is a group of students from M-Plan 1, leading a seminar on a paper that I wrote with, you can see on the right, with Hal a couple of years ago. Not only am I name dropping that because it's interesting and related to the studio, but also just to indicate that Hal was also a student on the M-Plan City Planning. So I just wanted to kind of indicate that students and staff do work together across programs, sometimes in relation to publications, sometimes in relation to research. And there you have a picture of a development in Newcastle, my home city, medium rise, medium density, which has won lots of awards. I've just noticed there's a few questions. So before I go on in the presentation, what time is it? Let me answer those questions. Wendy, can anyone who's not part of UCL publish with UCL Press, and what are the requirements? Well, firstly, the answer is yes. It's an open, it's a publishing house. It just happens to be hosted within UCL and is a UCL company. What are the requirements? Well, it entirely depends what you're going to publish. They tend to publish monographs and edited books rather than journal papers. And Wendy, also another question, is there any specialization on urban finance or a module on that? Yes, so we have a master's degree in international real estate and planning. Within that module, within that program, there's at least 2, if not 3 modules on finance, particularly development, appraisal, etc. Students who take programs that have options might also be able to take those modules subject to their own background and own skills. Brianne, I'm interested in the infrastructure planning, appraisal and development masters. Is the program specifically focused on public transport? No, it extends to all kinds of infrastructures. So the transport and city planning program, very specific to transport. IPAD, as it's known, is infrastructure in more general sense. Sorry, they're all coming in thick and fast. Hannah, to what extent can you take specialized electives from other programs within your own program? Okay, so sorry, I need to just let me rewind slightly. Nearly all of the programs have the option to take electives. Those electives usually come in pairs, number 1 elective in term 1, number 2 in term 2. In M-Plan, that would be in the first year. There are transport-related specialisms that you can take. So, for example, if you did M-Plan or one of the other programs, you could take the transport electives as your specialism. Nicole, are there any studios offered to MSc Urban Design and City Planning? There are, so the MSc Urban Design already has its own design studios. The M-Plan one is specific to M-Plan and can't be taken by any of the students, but there are other studios in the school. Ling, so thank you for that question. I'm aware that the courses are all relatively multidisciplinary. Your undergrad is in social science. Is any technical experience in planning or architecture necessary? Okay, very good question. So nearly all of our programs do not have a cognate disciplinary required background. So in other words, you might be able to, and as Mari said earlier, she comes from a social science background. I think that the challenge for those of you who don't come from a cognate background, if that makes sense to you, is to construct a personal statement that might convey your interest and desire to do the program. We don't require you to know that much about the discipline, but obviously we want you to convey your interest in it. So that's quite an interesting challenge, I think, in a personal statement, if that makes sense. Okay, I'll answer the next couple and then I'll finish my presentation if that's okay. Amelia, is there any specific program you would recommend for someone interested in blue and green infrastructure and nature-based solutions? Very good question. I mean, just because I teach on it, the MSc Sustainable Urbanism might be the most appropriate in the sense that that is a kind of theme that underpins nearly all of that content. A lot of the programs do have that as an interest area, but I think I'd probably recommend you have a look at Sustainable Urbanism. I hope that's useful. From Tam, hi Tam, what makes applicants stand out more? Experience-wise, is it necessary to have work experience? If not, would it be possible to apply? Absolutely. There's no requirement for any of you to have any experience in the area. You obviously need to meet the minimum entry requirements, which are usually around your degree, English language, for those of you who are non-native speakers, etc. I think the key really is to really spend some time on the personal statement, trying to convey your interest. So what is it about whichever program it is you're applying for that makes you interested? What makes, what is it that would drive you to do that program? And just as a bit of advice, we do get applicants who apply for more than one program, and you're allowed to apply for 2 maximum. Please, whatever you do, don't just submit the same personal statement to both applications, because we can see that you've done that, and that would indicate that you haven't really constructed the personal statement to be particular to the application. Sohrab, thank you for your question. How are the international planning and sustainable planning programs different from the programs in the DPU? Okay, so much as I dislike this concept, the DPU focuses on the global south, and we don't, is probably the easiest way of putting it. So whilst some of the concepts are quite similar that you deal with in the School of Planning, the context is very, very different. I hope that makes sense. Melis, thank you for your, is UK citizenship required to study the M plan? No. No, it's definitely not. Citizenship is not a requirement for anything. All students who don't have a right to study can apply for a visa, and all of our programs are eligible for those visas. Could I elaborate on how the work internship component is integrated? Okay, so I will speak very quickly to this, but in essence, as Mari said earlier, that the last term of the second year of M-Plan, you can either study abroad in one of the institutions listed on the website, or you can undertake a placement. So it's not an internship. So the placement is arranged by myself, and I, in essence, develop a bespoke placement for each of the students who choose that. So in other words, you have no responsibility to go and get that placement. So that shouldn't be a worry to you. I'm happy to meet separately to talk about that if that's of interest. Okay, I'm going to try to get to the end of the questions that are there already before and then we'll go on to finish the presentation. Will, hello. Oh, sorry, he's disappeared. My undergrad is in finance and 2 years in rail infrastructure delivery. Would this be sufficient to get me on the program? I'm not sure which program you mean, but the requirements of each program are outlined on the web pages. You need to have an undergrad. The degree classification will be indicated on that website. There's an English language requirement as well. But obviously, if you have experience in the field, then that would contribute to the admissions tutor assessing. Anna, which program would be best if I'm interested in international development? I'm not sure what you mean by international development. If you mean development internationally, then probably the International City Planning Programme. If you mean it from a kind of more global south perspective, I suspect maybe DPU might have the right programme. Okay, I'm just going to ask, I'm just going to answer these questions. No more questions for the moment after the ones I've answered, just so I can finish the presentation. Otherwise, we'll run out of time. Kyle, thank you. I'm currently a planner in the US. Do you feel like your program helps make the transition from planning in the US to the UK? Yes, is the easy answer. We do get quite a number of US and Canadian students taking the program. Many of those students want to and do stay in the UK after the program. And the current visa arrangements allow you to do that if you don't have a UK passport, that is. Pedro, applying for transport and city planning, interested in local and central government planning job opportunities. do employers from other countries in Europe with lesser immigration restrictions look for employees at the BSP? It's a very, well, I mean, I think, I'm not sure I can answer the question, to be honest. I mean, our students are in high demand by employers generally, and those employers aren't necessarily UK based. So lots of our students do work elsewhere. Sorry, can I just ask you to stop? Yeah, no more questions for the moment, thanks.
Michael, I'll keep a tab on where you're at, and then we can get back to it.
Okay, let me just finish answering these ones, and then my goal is to gain experience and come back to the UK. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, lots of people work around the world. What's the acceptance rate for M-Plan? I mean, this is a very broad brush. It's usually about 50 to 60%, but obviously not all of those people turn up at the end of the day. We have one more in the Q&A. Is there a large focus on software use in the programs, e.g. GIS? Now, that is a very good question. It actually depends which one you take. GIS is more prevalent in some programs than others. Any of the programs that require software use will provide opportunities for you to develop that. Livika, good evening. Oh, yes, hello. You're obviously ahead of us in time. You're currently working in the field of urban planning and have experience of more than 5 years. Will I be able to apply for MUP? I'm not sure what MUP is, I'm afraid. Could you just clarify what you mean by that? POW, are all the programs mainly focused on the UK context? No. Obviously, we draw from London as a laboratory and in some instances other parts of the UK, but also internationally as well. Jake, yes, there will be a recording afterwards, so don't worry. Okay, I'm going to try and... Masters of City Plan. Do you mean the M-Plan, Navika? Oh, yeah. I mean, I please feel free to contact me directly. It depends on your, assuming you have an undergraduate degree and whether you meet that requirement, then potentially yes is the answer. Okay, great. Just really briefly wanted to cover the application process. So please do, as I've said, you apply online. It usually takes 6 to 8 weeks to process. There are various pinch points, as you might imagine, outside of that time. And please do be aware that the university does fully close over the Christmas break and also over Easter. So that might take a little bit longer if you apply just before those dates. The how to apply pages, Maya will, thank you very much, Maya. Details of fees are also in that link. What I'd say to you, if you have specific questions about a program, please do send them to either the admissions tutor or program director, or you're very welcome to send everything to me and I'll answer where I can and direct you where I can't, or rather direct you where some more detail might be required. But more general questions about the application process can be sent to the graduate clerk. What I would say, just whilst I'm on this page, and I've kind of intimated it already, is by the time we as admissions tutors get to see your applications, really the main thing for those of you who meet the requirements that differentiate you is the personal statement. So please do spend some time thinking about what you want to say in that. My own take and my own view on this is that a good personal statement not only conveys your interest in the topic area, it also conveys a specific interest in the program that you're applying for. So in other words, it's not a generic, general personal statement. It's something that's personal to you, which just kind of makes obvious sense. But, you know, certainly for the M-Plan, those of you who want to apply for M-Plan are very happy to help you a bit more with those statements if that's of use. Anissa, is there any requirements for applying for a fee waiver? Not that I'm aware of. I'm not sure we have fee waivers. Regina, I mean, you're very welcome to, but none of our programs have a design portfolio requirement. Even for the urban design, there's no requirement, but the requirement is for a personal statement. So it's important that you think about that and develop it, and liaise with the admissions tutor and program director as necessary. Okay, one more slide and then I'll close the presentation down. Really good question so far, everybody. Thank you. As somebody who did a planning undergraduate degree many years ago, and who's worked in practice, had worked in practice for a long time, and now as an academic, planning is a hugely rewarding professional career. Additionally, London, a global city, is a stimulating city to study and live in. It's a laboratory for our subject. You will get many opportunities to look at what's happening in London in relation to planning and the issues that I've talked about already. UCL is one of the world's leading universities with the School of Planning at the forefront of planning globally. Our programs are cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary, and in many ways interdisciplinary. They're comprehensive, exciting range of teaching and learning methods and solid skill development. And just to finish, we also have the top students. One of the great rewards working at UCL is that we attract the best students from across the world. So it's a hugely stimulating environment. And of course, we'd be very happy to welcome your applications.